right. Free market, free love. How are you?
Hey, doctor, how's it going?
Good.
Hey, I just want to call in and give my input on my experience with critical race theory in college.
Okay.
And if you look behind me, you'll see portraits of all my ancestors going back over 150 years. My family came from Spain, and they've been in what is now America since the mid 1500s. And I'm very proud of where I came from and all the people who got me to where I am here today. But when I was in college, I was told that all my ancestors were evil. They were colonizers, they were oppressors, and I was told that my ancestors had a unique guilt, and the stain of racism is upon me. And I just wanted to say to you, my generation, I'm 22 years old, and there truly is a visceral feeling of being targeted because we are white. And I just want you to know from my experience that it is a very palpable feeling. And I think you're turning a lot of people off by coming out so strongly against it, even though, I know you had a troll call in and press you on your moral stance or amoral
hmm
stance. I just want to
Well,
say this. You've had a lot of trolls call in, and there isn't a block button in real life. And I know many men in my generation are pro-white, and there is definitely a backlash coming to this anti-white agenda. So how will you react when you are speaking in person and we are everywhere, we are numerous? What will you do when we hound you
well, the
anti-white?
first thing I would say is that you're making threats to me on the internet with your face fully visible, and that might not be the smartest thing you've ever done. But I will say this. Listen, the first thing I want to say is I completely understand that white men are being targeted and that a lot of shit is coming down on you guys. And I really don't want you to think that I'm not unaware of it, and I think it's awful. And I'm doing everything I can in my power to try to change this. I
Mm-hmm.
spend all of my hours trying to fight back against this because I don't think it's correct. And the thing of it is that I want you to know too, like I have been defending men in the workplace against false accusations of sexual harassment. I've been defending like against all these things because I do think it's incredibly toxic and I do think it's incredibly unfair. Every time I have a CEO come to me and say, I'm not hiring white men right now, I say, no, that is exactly the wrong answer. You need to hire the people that are best for the job. And so I want you to know that I'm trying here to make sure that this goes away and that we can come back to normal. However, getting into a white identitarian movement is not the answer for this. It's simply not. I'm on your team. I would have your back. I would advocate. I would defend, but I'm not going to do it based on the color of your skin. I'm going to do it based on who you are as a person. And when I look at you, I see a person who has a history, has a heritage, very proud of it. I see someone that at 22 years old is extraordinarily well spoken, like you obviously have confidence, you have that good demeanor, and I want to be an advocate for you, but I don't want to do it based purely on the color of your skin. I would offer the same support and the same advocacy for anyone, and I will be the first person to tell anyone that says I'm not hiring white men or white men are bad or toxic masculinity or all that stuff. All that stuff is bullshit, and I will freely say that, and I will go to bat. But what I cannot defend and what is absolutely going to destroy my work in this area is if anti white becomes the centerpiece of the movement, because we're playing right into the left's hands when we do that. They want that. They want to be able to point at people like you and say, look at that awful racist. We told you so. And when that happens, I can't defend against that. I can't. It's just it's too divisive, I think is the best word. And one of the things that we need to do in order to defeat critical race theory and to put all of this behind us is we need to get more people on the left to wake up. And that's something I'm highly conscious of. And they are not going to wake up and support an anti white thing. It's just not going to happen. So the best advice that I would give to you is that if you really do want to make progress in this area and you want to dial back all this toxicity directed at white men, we have that in common. I want to do that too. But I need you to work with me here in the reality of what's going on. And I've been fighting this for a year and a half now. I know what language plays well with people. I know what language doesn't. And I don't want to sacrifice all of the work that has been done for the pure purpose of being able to label something anti-white, because it's simply just much more complicated
Did
than
you
that.
say a year and a half?
Yes,
Well, this fight's been going on for much longer than that. With all
it
due
has.
respect, doctor,
It has.
you know,
I'm not saying I've been fighting it the longest. I'm just saying that that's my experience, and I have
I
dedicated
just
a lot of
think
time to it.
I understand where you're coming from, but I do think there is an element of cowardice to this because you had a caller call in saying that white people had to pay $20 to go to a pride parade. You yourself admit that there are people openly saying they won't hire white men. And there's no other way to put that other than it is anti-white.
Well, no, because it is much more complicated than that. I could also point to what they did to Senator Tim Scott when he got up and said America is not a racist country, and they vilified him and called him Uncle Tim on Twitter. Like, I mean, there are just
But
as many instances, excuse me, I'm talking. There are just as many instances that I can point out of racism against African Americans that have spoken out about this. There's just as many instances that I can point out of misogyny against women who have spoken out against this. There's just as many that I can point out against Asians that have spoken. I work with Chinese American groups that are fighting back against this. They get this backlash too. And I think that we are on the same page in terms of we don't want this shit to happen. But I do not believe that framing it in terms of anti-white is going to get the outcome that you want. It's going to create a movement that is not going to be controllable. And so I understand your
controllable by who?
frustration. It's going to spiral out of control in the same way that critical race theory has spiraled out of control. Like, if we're framing this in an anti-white context,
What are you afraid of?
all you're doing is creating critical race theory on the right. Critical race theory already exists on the left. Do you want to create the same thing on the right? Because it's exactly the same thing. And critical race theory has spiraled out of control on the left, and we're trying to rein it back in now. If something spirals out of control on the right, we aren't going to have that opportunity. So I'm going to give you one more question, and then we're going to move on.
It seems to me that you're more afraid of the right-wing backlash than you are of critical race theory itself. And to your point where you said we wouldn't have that opportunity to control it from the right side, what do you exactly mean by that? What are you afraid of?
I am equally afraid of both things because both things are exactly the same. I'm equally afraid of both. They're both exactly the same. Critical race theory has now spiraled beyond what the left can control, and the same thing is going to happen on the right with this white identitarian movement. It is exactly the same. It's two sides of the same coin. So I'm equally afraid of both. So thank you for calling in. I'm glad we were able to have a civil discussion. And, I really hope you don't go down this road, because I don't think it's going to be a winning strategy in terms of the goals that you say that you have. But I appreciate you being polite and having a civil conversation with me. And have a good night. All right. That went shockingly well. I feel like I'm very composed for people who think I'm spiraling out of control. I just want to say that. I feel like I'm being very composed.